Hi guys, we now enter the last part of the third chapter of the book India That Is Bharat by Sai Deepak, and here we will learn about psychocultural marginality. One scientific reason that was offered to explain the disparity in curricula was the colonizer's perception of a given colonized community's aptitude for knowledge based on race, the pecking order being whites, Indians, coloreds, and black Africans. The premise of this racial stratification was that Africans could not master bookish subjects, and therefore, even if given an opportunity, were incapable of competing with Europeans. My God. Accordingly, they were offered only vocational or industrial training. On the rare occasion that exceptional African students were offered access to an academic curriculum, the medium of instruction was English, proficiency in which was integral to academic success, as is the problem today, even in India. That said, even the academic curriculum would be centered on Europe and North America, which were portrayed as modern and developed, while African countries were shown as being traditional and backward. The policy of racial segregation was not limited to academics but extended to extracurricular activities as well. Those sports with higher earning potential such as cricket, rugby, tennis, hockey and polo were reserved for white students, whereas soccer, netball, volleyball, track and field events were open to all, including the others. Commenting on the objective of colonial education in Africa, Nelson Mandela remarked thus, "The educated Englishman was our model. What we aspired to be were black Englishmen. We were taught and believed that the best ideas were English ideas, the best government was English government, and the best men were Englishmen." Mandela was acutely aware of the fact that the purpose of colonial education in educating people like him was to create a new black elite in Africa that looked up to the colonizer and his way of life. Clearly, as some scholars on colonial education in Africa have pointed out, non-European and European children in British colonies did not receive the same education. While one was taught to serve, the other to rule, which was the vision of the colonizer, to colonialize the colonized society. To assume that this goal was limited to the education introduced by colonial governments would be factually incorrect. In Africa, which was divided up between the European colonizers such as Britain, France, Germany and Belgium, through the 1884 Berlin Conference, education was taken up by missionaries, merchants and colonial governments. Missionaries were much more candid than colonial governments about their objective of educating Africans, evangelization. Literature reveals that the intent behind sending Christian missionaries to Native American societies too was the same. The transgenerational trauma inflicted by Christian missionaries who accompanied the colonizer and who were responsible for running colonial schools was immeasurable. While some societies in Africa completely succumbed to European education, others resisted and turned schools into centers of revolutionary protest, thereby birthing liberation movements. However, by and large, the overall impact of colonial education was that the colonized were left with a limited sense of their past, and their indigenous traditions were gradually pushed towards extinction. To cut a long story short, colonial education annihilated a society's belief in itself. It made the colonized people see their past as one vast wasteland of non-achievement, and it made them desirous of distancing themselves from that wasteland and instead identify with an entity that was furthest removed from them, European culture. And as I have been telling even in the previous videos, that everything in this book, all these introduction, these are the beginning portions of the book, everything that scholars of decoloniality are saying about other nations, you will find that they are word for word, sentence for sentence applicable to India, even though they are not talking about India, they are talking about Native Americans and Africans. So you see the formula was same everywhere. Look at this sentence once again and see how this is so relevant to Indians. By and large, the overall impact of colonial education was that the colonized were left with a limited sense of their past, and their indigenous traditions were gradually pushed towards extinction. To cut a long story short, colonial education annihilated a society's belief in itself. It made the colonized people see their past as one vast wasteland of non-achievement, and it made them desirous of distancing themselves from that wasteland and instead identify with an entity that was furthest removed from them, European culture. Not only did it push the colonized natives further away from their heritage, but it also undermined their self-confidence at an individual level. All in all, this much is clear. European coloniality was directly responsible for disrupting the sacred relationship between indigenous peoples and nature, the destruction of their faith, language, political and social structures, and societal structures and knowledge, in short, their entire culture. This led to what the scholars have termed psychocultural marginality, wherein loss of cultural identity results in social and individual disorganization, which manifests as low self-esteem, extreme poverty, oppression, depression, loss of identity, substance abuse, violence, lower life expectancy, low education attainment, limited employment, poor housing, and ill health. It is a continuing state of limbo wherein the natives are neither capable of subscribing to the culture of the colonizer, nor going back to their own roots, since they do not exist as a whole any longer. This transgenerational trauma is cumulative, unresolved, historic, and ongoing, as long as coloniality is alive and kicking. It was to the credit of the determination of native peoples which kept alive whatever remained of their culture. It was this determination that gave colonized societies the strength and confidence needed to aspire for political independence, which was also partly a consequence of colonial education backfiring on the colonizer. However, as we shall see in the next chapter, the deep entrenchment of the coloniality of the Christian European colonizer through the establishment of his political, legal, and educational infrastructure impacted even the freedom struggles of colonized societies. So much so that their political aspirations, starting from the manner in which they defined freedom, to the political institutions they hoped to set up after independence, including their vision for the decolonized society, were all influenced by coloniality. While the impact of coloniality on freedom movements could not have been and was not uniform, there is no denying the fact that coloniality influenced them to varying degrees. As we shall see, the manifestation of secularized coloniality remains most rampant in political, legal, and religious spheres, which reflects in the misplaced sense of pride that several decolonized nations draw as inheritors of a common law tradition, or being part of the commonwealth of civilized nations, or as the beneficiaries of the Magna Carta. This includes internalization of that most fundamental of European political conceptions, nation statehood, and its attendant trappings.